All right, good night, everyone. We are live and we are getting ready for exciting discussion tonight. Here we have Angie next with us, Andre Palmer, Trevor Forrest, and Christopher Record. And I will be turning over to Andrew Nooks, which will be leading the night. So, great session, everyone.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Darren, and thank you for kicking this off. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening from wherever you're connecting from. Thank you for joining us for this, our first in a series of JTDA, Jamaica Technology and Digital Alliance Tech Talk Tuesdays. Today we're discussing an important topic, resilient systems and technology's role in Jamaica's readiness. My name is Andrew Nooks, and I'll be your host. But I want to start out with a moment that many of us will remember from October 2025. When Hurricane Melissa passed over Jamaica, the physical devastation was clear. But what became evident in the hours that followed, particularly across Western Jamaica, Westmoreland, Hanover, St. Elizabeth, St. James, and other parishes in the Western Belt, was something quieter and arguably more dangerous. There was digital silence. Mobile networks failed, fiber roads were severed, power outages cascaded, businesses that had moved to the cloud could no longer reach their systems. Health facilities reverted to paper, payroll stalled, families could not confirm the safety of relatives, government services slowed, not because systems did not exist, but because access to them was geographically and infrastructurally concentrated elsewhere. And what made this especially stark was that Kingston, our central hub for government, logistics, digital infrastructure, businesses, was largely spared. That contrast exposed a national vulnerability we don't discuss enough. Jamaica's critical systems are highly centralized, geographically, digitally, and operationally. In IT disaster recovery planning, we teach a simple principle: never allow redundancy points to fail at the same time. Yet, as a nation, most of our critical capabilities, data, decision-making, ports, connectivity, financial sector are concentrated in a single zone. So today's conversation is not about responding better next time. It's about designing differently. As someone who works across cybersecurity, data privacy, and now in AI governance, I can say this plainly. Disasters don't just damage infrastructure. They stress test governance, trust, and national confidence. And this is what our discussion tonight will be about. So without delaying us further, I'd like to introduce our panelists, some of whom you are very familiar with because they have been making the rounds over the years, and even more recently since the start of the year, they have been out there lending their voice, lending their expertise to the conversation generally. So with us, and depending on what you're seeing on your screen, to my right, it would be it would be Andre Palmer. And Andre has worked in technology and management consulting for over 18 years, and he has worked in complex organizations across North America, Europe, and the Caribbean, covering areas such as digital transformation, data privacy, strategic planning, customer experience, change management, and IT consulting. He now holds the hat of head of practice for the Caribbean at Securis, where he's responsible for strategic leadership of the organization in the region. And Securis, for those who don't know, is in the space of data privacy and protection. Next on screen, no stranger to our industry and our sector, is one of the major voices out there in the technology space, and has been that for decades. For as long as I know Chris, he has been operating the technology space. Chris Record is a distinguished technology executive, entrepreneur, and digital transformation strategist. He has been CEO for organizations such as T-Tech. And for those who go way, way back, innovative systems, innovative corporate solutions, were some of the organizations he has been involved with. But today he chairs multiple national and regional boards on AI policy, digital transformation, and data governance, including the National Artificial Intelligence Task Force and the CTU Caribbean AI Task Force. Chris is also a co-author of Successful Digital Transformation. And, so Chris, is an authority on the topics that we're going to be discussed. But right beside Chris would be another known name and face in this industry who speaks on secure software development, cybersecurity, data privacy, blockchain, resilience. So we have Trevor Forrest, and who I mentioned Chris was a co-author of a digital transformation book. Well, Trevor Forrest is the other author in that. I hope I have that right, gentlemen. I've seen the book and I've read the book, so I should have it right. Trevor is chairman of Lignum Security Limited, and more recently, Trevor has taken on the role of senior advisor to Minister without Portfolio in the Office of the Prime Minister, with responsibility for science, technology, and special projects. And we're talking about Dr. Andrew Wheatley. So just by your gestures, by any means necessary, please, make our distinguished panel welcome. And I'm going to just jump right into it. We have a couple of themes that we want to cover, and we just have an hour in which to do it. So if we're going at lightning speed, hopefully you will get to take away something from this discussion. All right, but we may be going at lightning speed and touching on some very serious issues here. Now, improving Jamaica's recovery through technology is a theme that people always talk about. How does technology really help? And I want to throw this out and ask Chris to kickstart our discussion. How can technology realistically improve Jamaica's recovery after major disruptions such as Hurricane Melissa? And Chris, I know you go way back, so what happened in Hurricane Gilbert in 1988 is, what we're faced with is much different, right? And persons will say, hey, it's cheese to chalk. Those of us who have experienced that may have a different perspective. But how do we recover, Chris? How do we recover after major disruptions?
So one of the things that I started to think about as we start talking about recovery, and more importantly, in every discussion about recovery, this word resilience keep coming up. I sat down, and being the bookworm and geek that I am, if you look around and see all the books behind me, I started studying, looking to say, okay, what happened in other countries that there were disasters? Mm-hmm. What was the major thing that they worked on first? And so you bring up Gilbert. For those of us who remember, I know some of the folks who are watching, listening might not remember, but I remember having to get my pans and go down the road and get water, right? So the water was a critical thing, one of the first things, because we weren't getting the light for months, right? This time around, and looking back to last year, Barry, looking to this year, the main thing that we all tried to get back was communication. And so I just start reflecting on how much that Maslow hierarchy of needs. We have seen the meme versions where right below that is Wi-Fi. And then, of course, there's always a joke version. Below that, you think you can do without me? It's a power, right? So the fact of the matter is that power and connectivity are the fundamentals of coming back to normal, coming back to what we all consider to be normal. But what really and truly is the actual issue? Some would argue that, well, the place wasn't built with resilience, it wasn't built with proper reliability. It wasn't built with enough redundancy. And for those of us in IT who've been in the data space for a while, Andrew, like yourself and everybody that's here, we know, and this is where I've been getting a little bit trouble now, so forgive me upfront. We know that when we as IT professionals go in and make the recommendations for what customers should do, we know what happens, right? I don't need to say it, but let me say it, right? They're like, yeah, that's so good enough, but the budget now really stretched to that right now. So can you give me a version that don't really have all of this backup everywhere? Just
Right.
one backup is good enough, right? So all of a sudden now, uh, it's not a capacity issue, but really and truly a distribution issue. And then more importantly, are the people listening to us, the experts who they came to, and we told them what to do, most of them didn't. And
Yeah.
so what happened with us right now, and not everybody, by the way, because some people end up working okay, is that Kingston became the central hub for most businesses' operations. And so, because we were spared, luckily, right? Give praises to the Most High. Because we were spared, all of a sudden, um, you know, all of the resources that were here, I mean, came back on within a couple of hours, a couple of days, and then everyone who had the ability to connect to it were also now brought back on speed relatively. So the foundational element of all of this, Andrew, um, is not because we lacked systems, right? It's because the access to the systems was now geographically dependent,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
again, I said, we've made a recommendations for redundancy in the past, and not very many people listen.
And Chris, I mean, you mentioned something important, right? You spoke about Kingston being the hub, or us being able to recover much more quickly based on Kingston. But had Hurricane Melissa taken the path that was projected early out, and I'm throwing this over to Trevor, how would that centralized system hurt us or help us in a scenario like that?
So that's a very good question, and I think if we try to extrapolate from what we saw happen in the 7 western parishes, what would become painfully obvious when we look at the scale of damage and the impact it had, not only on businesses, whether public or private sector, on that side of the island. If you extrapolated that to the rest of the island, so if we had a Gilbert type Melissa, we would not be having this discussion today, because it is almost certain that the infrastructure that we depend on for this very conversation may have been, severely impacted, which would then lead to the extended time period for recovery. And I think what Hurricane Melissa has caused us to have to do is to completely rethink this notion of resilience. Because what I think happened in many instances is where we thought we had resilience, where we thought we had redundancy. In many instances, there are examples of buildings and businesses in St. Elizabeth, Black River, that will never return to where they used to be because of the scale and level of the damage. And when you look at how that impacted infrastructure, it's almost as if there was nothing that we ever conceived before that would have prepared us for that. Now that's a good thing and a bad thing. The good part is now we have seen the kind of damage that a natural disaster of that level can do. We've seen how it has treated with what we thought was resilient and redundant. And we now have to rewrite the book on that. Because if we apply that to the central hub, which is Kingston, St. Andrew, the damage not only to infrastructure and the cost associated with that, but also the cost associated with the economic impact is immeasurable. Because just by what happened in the Western part, you talk about 40% of your GDP was almost wiped out. That's a lot of money.
Yeah.
And that's a huge impact. So I think what we seriously have, we've been forced to do now, as it relates to technology, how we look at building in resilience, building in redundancies. We cannot look at it the same way we used to.
Yeah.
And what is important for us to do is to now take the lessons learned and the dollar signs that are popping up and use that to, one, justify the actions that must be taken, tell that story in real terms, because now we can see it. And, in a more forceful way, make the case, especially the business case, around why we have to make the kind of new investment that we've never seen before. Because look at what could happen to you, because we're not making this stuff up anymore. You've seen it.
Correct. And Trevor, you mentioned something, right? And I want Andre to kind of chime in on that. You talk about, Kingston and St. Andrew being that hub. And there's a lot of resilience that, systems, financial institutions and all that build around their system in Kingston and St. Andrew. But Andre, are we strengthening a single point of failure when we put in the resilience in one thing? Are we looking at disaster and points of failure from a single perspective? Or are we looking at it more broadly? And what would be a strategy? Would decentralization be a strategy in looking at that? How do we combat that, Dre?
Yeah, good question, Andrew. And one of the things that is often said is that a component of the Chinese word for chaos is opportunity. And I think one thing that we can all agree is that Melissa was absolute chaos. But that has presented a golden opportunity for Jamaica. I mean, we didn't see it at the time, but conversations like these and talking about how we rebuild stronger, I think are important. So now that the proverbial dust has settled and our efforts have turned to rebuilding, we now have an opportunity to do just that. Look at how Jamaica, as a small developing island state, is structured, where our technology assets reside and the risk or opportunities that exist. And the focus cannot, in looking at all of these things, the focus cannot just be on rebuilding or replacing the thing that was lost or destroyed. But no, we have to have some very frank and serious conversations about redesigning our system so that they're stronger, smarter, better prepared for what in my mind is an increasingly uncertain future. Yeah. So the question around decentralization becomes an important one, because to your point, if the hurricane had hit Kingston in the way that it was projected to, we wouldn't be having this conversation today. So I think making the case for a decentralized technology environment is pretty clear, so that we are not just relying on a single point of access. We don't want to strengthen a single point. So there is definitely a case for decentralization. Yeah. There's also been a lot of talk about resilience, and Chris alluded to that earlier. And in every conversation that I've been in, resilience as a word comes up. But when we talk about resilient systems, we're also talking about systems that can adapt really quickly, recover really quickly, and can continue to deliver services even under enormous pressure and stress, and when one aspect of the ecosystem fails. And that is what resilience looks like in a decentralized kind of environment. So we continue to have support, we continue to have access, we continue to have availability, even if some areas have failed us.
Yeah, and there's much to unpack with that, right? Because in all of this, some things must have gone well. A couple of things must have gone well. But I will come back to that because I want to jump over to another part of what occurred during this. And, power and connectivity. We spoke about, the silence, the digital silence, the digital quietness across certain areas of Jamaica, during that. Power and connectivity remain major pain points. And I want to ask, starting with Trevor, what practical tech improvements can Jamaica adopt now to bolster ourselves against these loss of power, loss of connectivity? I hear everybody was trying to get a generator, but generator, you have to have the right environment to run a generator, and it does cost use gas for the most part, and that was even unavailable in certain parts of the country during the time. So what do we do? Power and connectivity, Trevor.
So there are certain realities that we have to face. All right. One, we live on an island. We live in a hurricane belt. And there's something I want to add to this conversation that sometimes we forget. While a hurricane is a known and popular natural disaster that will befall us, we also have to consider earthquakes and tsunamis and so on. So there are some realities that we have to face. We have one power provider on island. The transmission and distribution network is such that we have above ground power cables susceptible to hurricanes and other natural disasters. The cost of moving things entirely underground is prohibitive. The other thing that we have to also look at is our communications network, in large part, is also above ground, right? So and again, this is a factor of the cost of doing it a particular way. We have seen where we're moving certain aspects of the communications network on the ground, but the fact of the matter is, wireless communications requires a lot of your communications equipment residing on towers above ground and so on. So when you couple the fact that we have only one provider of electricity, the modality for our communications apparatus has to be above ground. It's only certain aspects of it that are below ground. What we have to start looking at now is, okay, what are the alternatives? So we will talk about generators. Generators need fuel. What we did see as one of the challenges during this past natural disaster was, even though a lot of the communications centers had generators, they could only last for probably 3-4 days. And after that, they're out, can't get to a gas station that requires power for the pumps to work, to get fuel to go and refuel the generators and so on. So we have some real issues that, regardless of what we do, you're going to face a certain degree of downtime. What we need to determine is what's acceptable downtime, until we can get to a point where we can start, building back to a particular level where communications and power is acceptable. Now, what are the options that exist? We do have, from a communication standpoint, the ability to communicate via wireless, or more so by satellite, right? Because the whole of Jamaica suddenly discovered satellite-based after this. And that was out of desperation and convenience, because prior to Melissa, so to speak, satellite-based communication was just like a novelty.
Yes.
Right? But at the same time, satellite communications needs power. So what did we resort to? We started to resort to modular solar powered systems, right? So what you start to find is now that we're looking at creative ways of restoring power outside of the traditional power supply. Where the generator can't work, you use solar. Solar needs sun. If the days are overcast, you have challenges there. So what this boils down to is the need for a blended approach to recovery, and then a new approach to redundancy after that. Because when we saw communication pathways being severed, it was as if, well, there was no other way to restore communications by rerouting traffic or anything like that. So we have to look at the redundancy part of things. And sad to say, when it comes to our transmission and distribution network, there is no redundancy there. And that is also because of some geographic and realisms that we have to treat with. And then lastly, we have to look at now, okay, after we figure out all the different tools, solar, generator, and all of those things, satellite communications and everything, to create pockets of restoration. How do we now expand those pockets in a rapid way, so that what we started to realize, people literally started losing their minds because of the dependency on digital communications. Literally started to lose their minds. So suddenly now it wasn't food or water and electricity. It is food, water, electricity, and communication. Right? So now it's a real thing that we have to start to look at. So those are the factors that we have to now put into the playbook for going from recovery, rebuilding, redundancy, resilience. These are all the R's that are in this playbook. But we have to apply it to our reality, which is another R. So,
and some of what I hear you saying, Trevor, you're talking about diversifying our power sources, and I'll use the term microgrids from solar, microgrids from wind, possibly, and see if we can localize some of those things. Would be part of that resilience for power.
That lends itself to your decentralization argument.
Correct. And but you also mentioned something that is troubling, right? For instance, we have two major telecoms provider and even our power distribution, and most of these, for the most part, rely on the same distribution path, the same poles, the same pathways and everything for distribution. Chris, how do we change that? How do we get other things, other methods in, to combat some of those challenges?
We have had so many discussions around these topics, Andrew. I glanced in the chat a while ago. I saw Jeff Waddington, who's up there in Canada. I hope he's not freezing. Given that power is also key to the delivery of water as well as communications, grid resilience would seem to be the most fundamental if grid is owned by a private company. That I suspect he has more to say. So let me tell you, I listened to Elon's talk at Davos. I listened to a few of these great thinkers recently, and I'm going to try to tie context. And some of these guys, when you hear them first talk, you kind of said, "Brother, what I'm smoking." I mean, they kind of think way, way, way out of the box.
Yes.
And so I'm kind of thinking to myself, well, we're trying to build stronger infrastructure. Why don't we design and build systems that assume that infrastructure will fail, right? Because Trevor brought up a point a while ago saying, hey, the nature of our geography And Andrew, I know that you have seen me on the hiking trail up in the mountains sometimes. And when you go into the innards of our mountains, you realize that there's a spine down the country that, man, I mean, what them building Cayman can't work here. Right?
Yes.
So we have to rethink and redesign, knowing that the system's going to fail. And then, so what do we design? What do we build? This is now where, in one of the discussions we had recently, and this is now where you have to consider, okay, will the sole power company allow this, or will they be a part of the solution in this? I think Trevor spoke about it earlier, this hybrid approach that we're talking about.
Yes.
Because I'm about to move house, and in that moving house, my reconsidering is around power. And I'm about to make a decision around selling my car, and my reconsideration is around, I think my next car is going to be electric, right?
Yes.
So I've been having a lot of debate. Is it going to be hybrid or just 100% electric?
Yes.
So in the discussion that Elon had, you may have heard the talk about putting the next AI data centers in space, because the greatest power comes from the sun. The greatest power is right up there.
Yeah.
And where we are placed in the geographic position of the Caribbean, we're at a very advantaged place where we get plenty sun.
Plenty sun, yes.
So how do we now think about including the sun in support balance out to the regular power grid solution? How do we put that in and build and design for infrastructure will fail, but my community can stand up, or at least we can have a start? I think when Trevor started, he spoke about some people are generators, you have a 2-day, you have a 3-day, you have a 4, whatever it is. But if it's a hybrid type of generating scenario in a regional way, because remember, and if anybody remember, we now have one generating power. I don't know if anyone has ever done the historical research where our power situation was from. We had about, this number is wrong, nobody don't attack me. We might have had about 15 or 16 power companies in Jamaica at one point in time. And even prior to that, anybody who had the wherewithal had a generator or had some sort of we used to call it Delco.
Chris, you're showing up your age there, man. You're showing up your age.
It's a superpower.
The brand becomes the thing, right? The brand becomes the thing, because we all knew it as Delco back then, just like how we know Thermos as that, right? Yeah.
Exactly. And so why I'm saying all of this is that sometimes and again, not a quote from the Bible, but there's nothing new under the sun, right?
Yeah.
Right? There's nothing new. So let's look back and say, what used to work?
Yeah.
Listen, that used to work when all of these independent things were all over the place, and then we bring it all together to solve a different problem. And then now another problem was created by solving those problems. So how do we make a hybrid version of all of this? So that's a question. I'm not putting any answers. I'm just saying it's a question.
Yeah, pretty interesting. I see Andre like he's itching to chime in, but Andre, I'm going to throw over the next section to you, because I look at the time and I'm realizing that we really don't have enough time for this discussion and to really flesh things out. So I'm going to throw this over to you, Andre, because in all of this and all this disaster and disruption and audience, please forgive us. We have a few themes we want to really touch on. We're not going to do any of them justice in a 1-hour session, but at least we want to plant that seed so you can think and be a part of the whole solution that we're looking at. So Dre, I want to throw this over to you, right? We're talking about strengthening. We're talking about resilience, but that has to be on the backbone of trust and safety. Digital trust, if you will. So data privacy violations, cybersecurity threats increase during disruptions. It's no doubt. People there's opportunity for everything. And there's also opportunity for criminals to make use of these. And how can Jamaica strengthen digital trust and digital safety whilst going through these type of disaster? And I know you wear the hat of a data privacy practitioner and all that. And I gather you have been seeing some issues, some violations, something just in the name of trying to recover and recover quickly. So talk to us a little bit about how do we maintain that?
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head, Andrew. One thing is for certain, and two things are sure. In times of disaster, the sharks come circling. Because they're aware that the systems and users are vulnerable. And that's what natural disasters do. They create chaos and they open opportunities for cyber criminals. We saw in the immediate aftermath of Melissa, I mean, the hurricane didn't even pass good. You saw, a number of sites pop up, asking for donations, targeting a lot of the relief efforts. So cyber criminals will always try to find ways of thwarting genuine efforts. To go directly to the question that you ask, and I'm trying to package this as succinctly as possible in the interest of time, but one of the things that we must recognize is that Jamaica can strengthen digital trust by combining cybersecurity resilience, trustworthy information systems, and inclusive digital services. And all of that must be underpinned by clear, robust governance structures. And that means a couple of things. It means that we must invest in ongoing cybersecurity and data privacy training awareness for our staff, for government officials, for telecom operators, critical infrastructure administrators, and the list goes on. We have to also support and scale public awareness campaigns so that we can quickly identify scams, phishing, online fraudulent attempts during emergencies, and so on. We keep moving to this cashless society and this digital society. But in building out that infrastructure and in building out the technology ecosystem to support that future that we are creating, the education and sensitization must also follow with that development. Another opportunity that I think we have is for the expansion and funding of the national cybersecurity teams, such as JCERT, for example. This enables them to be able to quickly detect and block and respond to threats quickly in times of crisis and recovery phases. So in really thinking about the public-private partnerships and how the government apparatus enables other arms of responders to play a part, we think about the role of some of these teams as we think about resilience and longevity. Another thing that is plaguing us in 2026 is, and that, we saw this maybe evolving over the last 5 years or so, is misinformation or disinformation and unverified reports. And one of the things that we just have to contend with is, as we digitize more services, we also increase our exposure to cyber threats and possible data privacy violations. So as we rebuild, we have to do so from a privacy by design perspective, as well as a security by design perspective, so that systems are secure, they're resilient, they're trusted. If people don't trust the systems, they won't use them. And then the entire resilience effort collapses. So the bottom line, Andrew, is simple. When people can rely on their digital systems, whether for emergency alerts or rebuilding information to doing online transactions or for whatever, the entire recovery process becomes more equitable, resilient, and trustworthy.
Mm-hmm. Trevor, your perspective, because I would love to ask to know, how can Jamaica design privacy preserving emergency operations and protect citizens when we're in a disaster and responses are slow and stuff like that? How do we do that? You mentioned that the Cyber Crimes Act and cybersecurity strategy and all those things are coming up for review and debate and stuff. How can we attack this problem in a way that would protect us even during the biggest of crises?
Well, interestingly, while it's a very complex undertaking, I think the most important component of all of it is public awareness.
Mhm.
I think that is the basis, the fundamental building block of everything we're talking about as relates to trust, understanding our system. Awareness, because every aspect of what we see in the proliferation of cyber threats, scams, threat actors taking advantage of disasters and so on, is amplified by the fact that their targets are not sufficiently aware of what to look for. And I don't think it's something that at a national level we've been doing a bang up job around. Because, for most of us, it already makes sense. But we do have a constituency and a very large constituency of citizens. And a lot of this stuff doesn't occur to them. They're not aware, and which is why you're seeing a lot of things being, perpetuated in WhatsApp.
Yeah.
WhatsApp scams and threats have skyrocketed. And I think when you peel away all those layers, awareness, we're not doing a good job around that. And that awareness not only extends to security and data protection and privacy, but it's awareness generally across the board as to what you should do, how you should function, what are the things that you need to pay attention to when these kinds of disasters occur. So just to give you a very simple example, and I mean, I would put this to the audience. How many people in the audience, if you have a family, have determined and decided on a standard meeting point whenever an earthquake happens? So if your children are at school, you're at work, earthquake happens, communications gone, everything. How do you make sure that you can reestablish communications? The most suggested ways is, prior to any disaster, you decide on a meeting location that everybody knows that wherever you are, go here. So it's like the assembly point.
Assembly point, yes.
Parking lot, right? But you're applying that now to your family, because the thing with a hurricane, when it comes, everybody hunker down at home. But during an earthquake, this is an awareness thing where if you don't have that discussion and tell people why that's important, everybody knows that, boy, when an earthquake comes, here's what you're supposed to do. You either go stand up in the doorway or go on the table or something like that. But awareness, very important. And I think across the board, the fundamental building block to how we solve that problem that you speak of is awareness.
Yeah. So then what we're saying is that the gap is not just a technical thing. We can't fix this with technology. Resilience requires digital literacy and not just expert level.
There is a people component,
Yes.
So just like as Chris will tell you, I mean, even in the book, when we talk about digital transformation, it is technology is just one small component of the larger beast that is digital transformation. There is a component in there that is people.
Yeah, and most of these systems are designed to serve people, right? So we can't leave people out of
you
this.
cannot leave people out of the loop.
Yeah.
And aware people, aware citizens, an aware population is itself more resilient than one that is not aware.
All right, great. Wish we had a lot more time. We are 50 minutes out, and I have two other things that I just want to touch on, skim the surface on. And that is, and I'm throwing this out, whoever grabs it. Protecting SME operations during disruptions. SME forms a large part of the economy. They employ the most persons and stuff, and basically is a driver for our economy. How can Jamaican SMEs protect operations when we have challenges, cyber challenges, when we have power challenges, when we have connectivity challenges. What should SMEs do? If you're speaking directly to SMEs, what would you tell them?
Um, Andrew, let me start, and then I'll leave the space for everybody else. All of us here have been on the stage talking to SMEs and talking to uh, anyone who will hope will listen to us around putting in systems, processes to actually solve that problem. And we hope that they listen and we hope that they take notes. And I will, as I was listening to the various discussions earlier, I kind of looked off and my mind started to wonder about the amount of times when you go up there, for example, talking about cybersecurity. Here are the top 5 things that you must do.
Mm-hmm.
You must have an asset list of all your hardware, asset list of all your software. In my role as former chair of the Data Protection Oversight Committee, the various awareness campaigns you're talking about your private information, where the people go out there and drop the information everywhere, all over the place, and then complain if all of a sudden one little thing happens. Andrew, I'll confess that after a while, it's almost like, why bother, right?
Yeah.
Because nobody's listening. But organizations like JTDA, which is where we are here at JTDA, I'm doing this, are the conduit for pulling the data from quote unquote experts like us who have been in the field for decades
Mm-hmm.
and put it in bite size, easy to learn, um, digestible ways that SMEs or even mid-sized large corporate can understand. Because if those SMEs don't have a partner like a Andre or a Trevor to go in and do some of this work, they're scrolling and they're searching online. It comes back to the question I just started out. We don't talk about trust and all of that,
Yes.
right? And so again, I'll put on my other hat. I was looking at the actual hat. I was looking for my PSOJ hat. So organizations like the PSOJ, Jamaica Chamber of Commerce, JTDA, we try to ensure that we agree upon the very, very important information that need to be shared. And then we just deliver digitally, we hand out, we send out emails, we just keep putting it in front of them until they listen. That's the easiest, simple, not coming in a fancy way on a video on a YouTube. We just have to put the information out there, recommend, here's what we learned from other countries our size, here's what we learned from other disasters similar to this, here's the 10 things that you need to do to keep your thing safe.
Andrew, if I may, really quickly, just to
Go ahead.
extend the point that Chris is making, if I can leave one thing with the SME sector, it is to never underestimate the power of a business continuity plan. I can tell you, especially one that has been tested, I can tell you that it comes in handy. And a lot of organizations treat this as a box ticking exercise. They create a plan and it lives somewhere on their shared drive or in a filing cabinet, and it's never tested, cascaded through the organization, or implemented. But a key question you want to ask yourself in the design of that business continuity plan is, how do we make money if our systems are down? And if you can't answer that question in your business continuity plan, then you haven't done it properly. Can you print a customer contact list, for example, or a price list? Or can you do physical invoices? Do you have the ability to accept cash? In the event that you can't accept card payments, can you issue manual receipts or record transactions offline and reconcile after? The reality is that a lot of organizations that I talk to in the SME sector often believe that a BCP is only for large, complex organizations that are operating at scale. And that's not true. And I think Melissa taught us that there is also the need to, of course, implement and maintain a robust privacy program, because one element of that program will be a risk assessment, which will help you as a small or medium-sized entity to understand the areas in your operations that present possible risk exposure, and then to go a step further by looking at what you can do to mitigate against those risks in the event of a disaster like Melissa. So just wanted to drop that there, the power of of a BCP, and just making sure that you have a robust privacy program in play as well.
You know, Andre made a very important point. And I want to just piggyback on that. You see, when people, and because, you know, and I'm going to put on my service provider hat.
I need a couple of hats as well.
Of a lignum, and we're retired. Not only
I need to go for some hats and start put on myself here, you know.
but when you even talk about micro, small, medium enterprises, you see how they use terms like business continuity. The term itself almost connotes big business. And I don't think that we've sufficiently made it, again, attractive enough that, listen, a business continuity plan for a single or a solopreneur exists and is no different from a business continuity plan for a multi-billion-dollar organization. It's just that how you go about executing and implementing it is different. So a business continuity plan for a solopreneur might be, everything I have is on this removable SSD drive. Oh, and by the way, I happen to have it backed up to the cloud. That's my business continuity plan. It can be as simple as that. I think sometimes we overcomplicate some of these measures, and we try to apply the approaches that we use for large entities to the small ones. And when you start to do that, then the dollar figure starts to become painful hours, and they're like, well, gee, boy, this business continuity thing,
listen,
that's like a whole heap of money. But we have to tailor it to the type of business, type of audience. So the business continuity plan for a micro enterprise is fundamentally different from the medium and the small and the large and so on. And we need to make that clear, because I can guarantee you, when you speak to some of these businesses who have no more than 5 people, you know, business continuity plan is big words, and it's money.
Trevor, you raise an important point there, you know, because a lot of it is not just tailoring the plan to match the size of the business, but it's also tailoring the language.
Absolutely.
Tailoring the language. So when person hears business continuity, Chris, I'm going to ask you to hold on that and probably comment in the next section, because we have about 5 minutes left, and I really want to touch on the last point.
I want to highlight Brand A Jamaica's comment though. As a country, we need to, you saw it? As a country,
we need to start really talking insurance serious. As a country,
taking insurance
serious. As a country, we really don't take the value of business insurance seriously.
Yeah,
it's a good point.
It's a good point. Thank you, Chris, for highlighting that. I'm jumping on, right? And sorry, guys, again, for rushing through, because each of these themes are topics unto themselves. I want to talk about resilient by design and look at Jamaica's future in wrapping this discussion up and stuff. You know, looking ahead, what should resilient by design look like? And I know Chris and Trevor, you wear several hats and you're in several discussions. You know, I may even push that to say, what is Jamaica doing post Hurricane Melissa? And I know some initiatives have started way before Hurricane Melissa. And so, but what are we doing to be resilient by design for our future?
Well, I can start off, and then Trevor can jump in after.
And bear in mind that we have about 5 minutes left.
So let me talk fast. The Office of the Prime Minister, on the leadership of Minister Andrew Wheatley, formed in November a task force called the Technology Recovery and Resilience Task Force. So it's based out of the Office of the Prime Minister. Minister Wheatley is the chairperson. I'm the deputy chairperson. Trevor is the executive coordinator. Another hat. I was looking for a hat. Yes, another hat. Yeah, man, another hat. So, so the fact of the matter is that the main purpose is for coordinating. Is a coordinating body bringing together all of the private sector players in and around technology and to sit with government to make a plan to build back better and stronger. And this whole, notice the word resilient is in there because that is something, as Andre said, and I said, Trevor said, you said, it is often repeated over and over again. That's one of the main things is there to, pull all of the technical expertise to make the recommendations. The first ask of everybody is that, hey, what you guys have right now that could actually help us get this thing going, right? Mm-hmm. And so a number of folks jumped in and made donations with various technologies to get things back going immediately. So that was back in weeks after the hurricane. People were doing things, importing technology, going in there. Biggest thing, of course, as I spoke about, is communication. So all of those things happened, and that work began. So it's there's damage to hospitals and schools and education facilities, government facilities, and all of that. So our working groups, government systems, educational systems, health services, emergency response, citizen services, and planning and coordination as the overarching. That's a breakdown. We meet weekly. We've been meeting weekly every Wednesday to kind of move coordination and move the planning and get updates as to the various areas. So that's kind of what we've been doing.
Okay, thank you so much, Trevor.
Add any sprinklings or sauce to it?
Well, no, I mean, I as it relates to the Technology Recovery and Resilience Task Force, I mean, what it highlighted was the need to orchestrate a coordinated response across those sectors that Chris had mentioned: government services, health services, emergency services, education, and citizen services, which we viewed as the top 5 areas that most impacted the citizenry from the standpoint of government and the services that it provided. There was an immediate recognition that there needed to be a coordinated response from a technology standpoint as it relates to recovery. Above that, some may or may not be aware that there is an entity being stood up called NARA, which is the National Recovery and Resilience, Rebuilding and Resilience Authority, right? And what it is there to do is for the overall recovery effort. It has a finite life cycle, but one of the things that was clear was that, look, we had to know, again, as I said, rethink, rewrite how we would treat this stuff. The Technology Recovery and Resilience Task Force has started to do some work as it relates to how we now treat with each one of these critical government areas, public service areas, and how we not only facilitate recovery, but create frameworks, processes, methods, the whole shebang around building things back, learning from the mistakes, building some resilience into it. And in some cases, assessing the risk, because one of the things that, again, many people may assume has been done, but wasn't done, is assessing the risk and the dollar figure associated with risks and putting that in front of policymakers, bean counters, and so on to say, listen, here is why we need to make these investments.
And listen, Trevor, I hate to cut you, but I have to stop you right there. We're right on the 8 o'clock mark, which is our cutoff point. And I want to just share with the audience a couple of points that I've taken away from this discussion, and hopefully that it can help them. But I'm urging the JTDA that this conversation has to continue. At some point, breaking down these topics into smaller bits, so we have more time. What I'm taking away from this is that resilience is about design, not just recovery. Disasters don't just test how fast we can rebuild. They test how systems are designed in the first place. We should build systems that expect outages. I think Chris said that, not systems that assume they won't happen. Design for graceful degradation. partial function is better than total failure. And resilience must be embedded before the next crisis, not added after. Here, Andre talk about responding and planning and all of that. Centralization creates speed. And this is takeaway 2. Decentralization creates survival, right? Digital systems should be geographically distributed. Physical logistics must have regional redundancy. We need to talk to our regional partners about redundancies. We need to talk data embassies when we're talking about our data and some of our critical data. Looking at the Estonian model that Jamaica started looking at years ago. Decentralization is not duplication, it is risk management. And we heard risk, Trevor mentioned risk just now. The balance is efficiency helps us to move faster during normal operation. Decentralization helps us to keep moving at all when conditions deteriorate. Efficiency helps us move faster. Decentralization helps us keep moving at all. And the last takeaway is trust is critical infrastructure. Privacy and cybersecurity must hold even under pressure. Emergency response should never require abandoning projects. And then digital trust directly affects economic confidence and national credibility. It's not overhead. Resilient systems protect people, not just when things are normal, but when they are most vulnerable. Right? So, that's the takeaway. Design in resilience, distribute strategically, protect digital trust.
And Andrew, I know we're over the time.
I'll give you each a couple of minutes, and I'll ask the audience to indulge us for 3 more minutes. When I give each person a chance to just some closing remarks.
Well, look, I'm giving my closing remarks to the audience because I think there's some great points here. I see a point from, I think this is Nathania Campbell, saying that sorry we didn't touch on distribution of money or technology. I think that's a good point because that come up in the trust and digital and all of that. Yes, the same person says this Jamaican needs more education. Nathaniel, let me tell you something. It's not for want of trying to educate and go there, but sometimes they don't turn up, and when they turn up, they don't listen. But thank you very much. It was a great session, folks. Yes, we need more time. Some of us on the inside, we're discussing these things regularly. Yes, at the task force, we are trying to make a difference with this information and put forward the recommendations to the areas that should matter. So thank you very much.
Andre?
So I guess, I agree. We've covered a lot, and that some of the themes are actually really, really broad. But I guess in my mind, the question is, so what? What do I do with this information? If I'm in the audience listening, how do I go away and do things differently? The reality is that technology today is a force multiplier. It allows us to act faster, to coordinate better, to make more informed decisions, and so on. So learning from the experience of a Melissa, we now know that we need to, in building resilience, we have to do things differently. So look at ways of creating redundancy, simplifying your operations, educating yourselves and your business community, your staff, and then practicing your business continuity plan, whatever name you want to call it. And just always remember too that resilience is cheaper before the outage than after it. And I saw Jeff making that comment in the chat as well. Hope you found the information useful.
Thank you. Trevor?
Well, I think everybody, has sufficiently covered all the points, but I think the one thing that I will continue to harp on as it relates to how we treat with things is if we expect to better survive these kinds of natural disasters, because the reality is, and what is expected and anticipated, whether you believe in climate change or not, is that these kinds of disasters will be more frequent and just as devastating. Is that an aware populace is a resilient populace, and the more aware we are, the more intelligent we are, and the more aware we are of the realities that persist and exist, is the better equipped we'll be to come up with meaningful solutions to the problems that have been laid bare by this thing called Melissa. Because again, yeah, I've talked to a number of different people who, when you talk to them, it's like, oh my gosh, I just could have never thought that this could have happened. So this thing where, you know, as Chris said, you build with the expectation of failure. That's really based on an awareness factor that, yes, this is going to happen. So I think, again, fundamentally, making people more and more aware. We just need to, you know, tailor that message and break it down. The language that we use is important. I think once we start to make everybody aware, from the lowly farmer all the way up to the policymakers and even us, the technical people, who may not always be aware of the realities on the ground in real life that faces certain types of demographics. Awareness is a critical component to this resilience effort that we have.
Yeah. And there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. We want to thank you so much for giving us some time out of your evening. And so we wish you all a very good evening, and I hope the information here is useful. We hope to see you again when we do our next JTDA Tech Talk. And with that, I bid you a good night. Thank you very much to our panelists, Andre, Chris, Trevor. Thank you so much, gentlemen. This has been an interesting discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Good night, everybody.
Good night.